Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, everyone.
We are streaming live across Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. So, as you're coming into the live, I want you to put in the comments where you are checking in from. And then also, I want you to say whether or not you're doing so, do hashtag live. And then if you're catching the replay, I want you to do hashtag replay. All right, we're going to let a few more people get into the live. We got people checking in from your LinkedIn, Nathan, and then from my LinkedIn, we've got people checking in from Facebook, and then also on YouTube. So we'll give a few minutes before we start. Just a few minutes. All right, we've got somebody checking in from North Carolina. Yes, okay, all right, good deal. We got Washington checking in. All right, DFW, we got people all over the place. So make sure that you are hashtagging live. And I want if you're catching this replay, because we will post the replay or post the recording. So if you miss any part, you definitely can watch this later. So hashtag live, hashtag replay, but let us know in the comments where you are checking in from. If you want to tell us the platform that you're coming from, we are streaming live across Facebook, across YouTube and LinkedIn. But let us know what part of the country you're checking in from, or what part of the world, because this is, being broadcasted globally. We've got people checking in from all over. All right, so I'm Ashley Thomas, and I'm a job search coach with Right Step Resumes. And I have invited Nathan Adams, who is also he does a lot of career coaching as well as resume writing. And we are here to do live resume reviews for you. We've had people submit their resumes for us to really give that one look at it to see, okay, what is our initial impression of these resumes? Because I know people are struggling in the job market right now. They are thinking like, I'm tailoring all these resumes, I'm applying for all these positions, but I'm not actually getting any traction on anything. I'm not able to get interviews. I'm getting ghosted. What is happening? So we've had people submit their resumes, and we're going to give them our honest opinion about what we think is going on with their resumes. So I want you to ask questions in the chat. We will be taking a few minutes in between resumes to answer any questions that you have, and make sure that you're connecting with us. We are on LinkedIn as our name. So I'm Ashley Watkins Thomas on LinkedIn. And then you can find Nathan Adams there. But while you're getting acquainted, in the comments, we're going to quickly introduce ourselves again for those of you who are checking in for the first time, and then give you an opportunity to ask whatever questions you want to chat. And then we're going to jump into these reviews. So I'm a nationally certified resume writer. I'm also a job search coach. And so I have a company called Right Step Resumes. I was a corporate recruiter for about 20 years, a little bit over 20 years. And in the time that I was recruiting, I started Right Step Resumes because I wanted to give insider secrets to job seekers just like you, because I saw people making very correctable mistakes, right, in their job searches. And it was costing them, a lot of money, because they were leaving money on the table by not negotiating, not updating their resumes with the appropriate information, and really just not targeting and tailoring everything for those opportunities. So because of the knowledge that I provide, or the perspective that I provide from the recruiting standpoint, I've been published in several major publications across the world, and I've also been named on JobScan's list of who to follow. And then I've been LinkedIn top voice for a couple years now. So I primarily work with mid-career to senior level professionals, really helping them land more interviews and also higher paying roles with the skills that they already have. So that's basically what I do in a nutshell. I'm going to let Nathan introduce himself as well.
Good evening, everyone. Nathan Adams here. This is our third session, I believe. Me and Ashley kind of teaming up. So I'm a resume writer and career coach. I got into this industry 23 years ago this year. Background's in engineering, and I lost my job to a layoff and changed gears at that time, and been writing resumes and doing career coaching ever since. Have published resumes nationally. I've done a lot of work in the outplacement space. There's a lot of companies I work with that provide outplacement services to folks when they get laid off. And so I partner with them and provide coaching and resume writing services. Over the 23 years, I've written and reviewed thousands of resumes. And, Ashley and I, just for folks that don't know, we partnered up earlier this year and was on a webinar, and we decided, you know what, we had good chemistry. Let's see if we can give the folks some resume advice kind of live and kind of see where that takes us. So we're happy to be here again. Hopefully we can provide some advice on these resumes that'll help you all.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one thing we wanted to, to mention as well is that when we're reviewing your resume, because we've let people know that, hey, your resume is up this week because we collected a bunch of resumes initially before we started this. And because of the outpouring, of it, we have tons of resumes still, to actually get through. But if you implement any of these changes, send us a message and let us know. I'll take a quick look at your resume. Make sure that you're sending it to either me or to Nathan and say, hey, I was on the live. I changed this about my resume. Can you take a look? This is for people whose resumes are being viewed on the platform right now. Okay. And then if you had success with any of the changes that we've helped you implement when it comes to your resume, and you've started to get an interview, you're having recruiters look at your LinkedIn profile, whatever it is, let us know, because we want to let everybody else know so they can see the benefit of making just these very, very small changes. A lot of you all don't need, big overhauls. It's just certain small little tweaks that you can make that, can get you better success in your job search. So let's jump right in. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Ashley. Let me do that PSA.
Yes.
For those of you that may not know, so Ashley and I get paid for this, in our day job. And so we're doing these free reviews, of course, but what we can't do is, review someone's resume, they make the changes, and then they send it back in for another review. We're not going to free review your resume to success. We'll give you a free review the first time. And if you want additional services, feel free to reach out. But we want to give you a review the first time. But, I want to be honest with you that we don't want to review your resume every single time we do these events. You can't just get a review and then send it in, make a change, send it in, make a change. That's not the goal of what we're trying to do here.
Yep. All right. Good deal. Good deal. So, hey, Elizabeth, checking in from Alabama. Got some of my peeps on here. All right. So let's jump right in. So this is the first resume. All right. And do I need to blow this up any? I think we're good. I think we can see that pretty decently.
Let me go full screen on mine. Okay.
Yeah, I went full screen. All right. So this is a resume. So we have someone that is targeting HR. So the first thing I noticed about this resume is 3 pages. Doesn't need to be 3 pages. Okay. Typically, especially not with this experience. Just for clarification, resumes can be anywhere from 1 to 3 pages, but typically 3 pages is for people who have done a lot of projects. So maybe project managers, but then you typically see those 3-page resumes for someone who has executive level experience, very, very senior leadership roles. And so those resumes require much more information from a holistic standpoint. So you may have somebody that's going back, 20 some odd years to talk about their leadership experience. Your average everyday individuals who may be, at the mid-career into senior level, you don't need a 3-page resume 9 times out of 10. This resume specifically does not need to be 3 pages. So if you can see around the edges of the document, there is there's a decent amount of, of white space there. So it's not overdoing it when it comes to the white space, but what's happening, there's huge blocks of text. So we've got one position itself, and these bullets, they're not aligned for one thing. So it's, it's kind of wavy when you get down to your bullets, but there's tons of bullets. Not only are there a lot of bullets, there are bullets that are 3 lines long that are taking up 3 lines. So that is making that information, a little bit of information about your education, spill over to that 3rd page. So when you have that happening where you've got just a teeny bit of information going to a 3rd page or a 2nd page, whatever it is, that means that your document truly needs to be trimmed down. So you can find a way through maybe the font size. You don't want to go too small. But you can look at your spacing, and then you can also look at your content. Do I have too much information under these, for these roles? And I feel like for this position, it absolutely does have too many bullets. And a lot of these bullets are task focused. Okay. So right out of the gate, I know that this person has listed, different links to sites. Like they've got their phone number there. They've got all this. Of course, I've covered it up for confidentiality. But I saw where they linked their LinkedIn. They have it as a hyperlink. That is a way that you can save spacing, where somebody's just going to click, click on the link. So I don't have any problem there. We see exactly what they're targeting. It's an HR role, so they're targeting something very specific here. So I see Director of Human Resources. I see Human Resources Manager. So that's letting me know right away this should be an HR resume. This is what they're talking about, and then they're giving me their areas of specialty. So I love that. But then we jump into results driven and strategic. Those are very overused buzzwords. So I would find another way to describe myself when it comes to that. With over 10 years of comprehensive experience. So I would say this summary section, it is a bit long, and it could be, stretched out because it looks like the margins are different for the top part of the resume versus the other part, because you can see where the core competencies is. It's not aligned, with everything else. And then you can see where the paragraph starts at the top of their resume. It is not aligned with the paragraph that's in the experience section. So that lets me know there's some spacing or some formatting issues there. But it's also 6 lines long. And so I would say leave it at 5 lines. I typically try to bullet this section so it is easier to read, so there's not wall-to-wall text. There are some accomplishment bullets that are kind of woven into this text, but they get lost in the sauce because there's too much information here. So they've done a good job explaining the task focus or the scope of their jobs here, but they have not done a good job of streamlining those bullets, because no position should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 bullets. That's too much. 5 to 6. Keep it at 5 or 6 bullets that are very concise, very high impact. So if you don't say wow when you read that, or it makes somebody want to know more, it's a task. Get rid of it. It just comes with the territory, if you're that Director of Human Resources. So I would say find a way to streamline this content. What is most important to the for the roles that you're applying to? And then when you've got your achievements, like say on the second page at the top, where you have your HRIS in administration, that particular bullet, it's looking like, you optimize data accuracy by 15%, but that's kind of hidden in there because it's stuck on the top of the second page. And then it's also not front loaded. So when we front load achievements, that means we give the results first and then we tell the how. But this is way too much information here. There are other things that are, probably, accomplishments on the first page. But again, it's just so much text here. You don't really know what to look at, right? So that's my assessment of this particular resume. What do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, I have to echo everything you said. I'm getting lost in the bullets. It's a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
I get the impression that they say, well, look, I'm a jack of all trades, so to speak. So I'd say, look, what out of those 15 bullets in that first job, what's the most important?
Mm-hmm.
What do you really want the hiring manager, the employer to see, and remove the other ones? And that there are some task things kind of sprinkled through that I would say, either clarify them with a car statement, challenge, action, results format, or remove them all together. It is long. I don't think it needs to be 3. Now, I guess you flipped the education on the right. You did that right.
I flipped that, yes,
Okay.
because it was, in order for us to have a decent sized resume and then be able to see all 3 pages. Yeah.
The assistant store manager job, it goes back 10 years ago. I don't know if we need to go into a lot of detail there. I mean, you got the executive director role and the director of human resources role. So maybe with the store manager role, we don't have to be, we could probably drop some information there to free up space as well. Because again, that was 10 years ago. And I'm not sure anyone's going to dig into the weeds on what you did during that time period anyway. So, but yeah, I echo everything else you said. I saw some responsible fors in there. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine.
Right.
I don't like to use that phrase responsible for. I really try to drop that and try to be more concise. So yeah, I think the big takeaway is get this to 2 pages, remove some of the bullets that are less relevant. Really can't be a jack of all trades. So think about really what your brand is and really how you want to sell yourself, and focus on those accomplishments.
Yep. Excuse me. So the rule of thumb here when you write your resume is that you will have a description under each position. That is where you explain in a couple of lines what you were hired to do. Your bullets are accomplishments only. That's it. Your bullets should not be anything else other than accomplishments.
Yeah,
If
no
it's
stress.
not talking about success in some way, it doesn't have to always be a number. But if you are not showing where you have improved something, made something better, it is not an accomplishment and it should not be a bullet. That is how you keep your bullets slim and trim. All right. So I've got a question. How do you feel about a functional resume? So, from a recruiting standpoint, functional resumes create more issues than they resolve. So, functional resumes are, for those of you who don't know, the functional resume will give a synopsis, maybe, of all the positions, all of the relevant skills that you have. So, you may list all of your successes and stuff, and kind of lump your information together without listing where you worked, when you did it, or whatever. So then for the experience section, it just has your position, titles, company, your work, locations, dates. That's it. So the problem with that functional resume is usually I know that somebody's using that functional resume when they're trying to switch careers and do something different because they think that that's the best way to highlight their experience. It's not. The second thing it does, it tells me that they're trying to hide something. They're trying to get my focus on something else when there is a better way to do it. Yeah. And as a recruiter, functional resumes don't work for me because now I don't know what experience applies to what job. So it makes me ask questions that I wouldn't otherwise have had you just listed your resume chronologically. Now, what I do is create a hybrid style resume. So I draw attention to the skills that I want the person to see that are transferable, right? So we do a snapshot of maybe 3, possibly even 4 to 5, depending on how long those bullets are. But I give those bullets at the top, but the rest of the resume is listed in chronological order, the way that it should be, right? Going from most recent to, to furthest away. And then now I'm going to only focus on the aspects of those jobs that are relevant to the job target. Okay. So you don't have to delete those positions that are not relevant to your target. You just only talk about those things that are relevant. Okay. So that's one thing. You want to add anything else about that?
Yeah, for the folks that are not familiar, Google the hybrid resume. It's like the best of both worlds. It takes the best of the reverse chronological format and the best of the functional format and kind of combines it into one. So I've used that a lot with clients that have some tricky situations we're trying to, get around. Maybe we're trying to pull some experience from earlier in the career. And so the hybrid resume works well. So if you just Google hybrid resume, you'll see that format and you'll see how it's kind of like a functional, but it brings in some portions of the reverse chronological. Because I think the biggest problem is recruiters, when you do a purely functional one, you lose the attachment of what you did and where you did. Attachment to what you did and where you did it. Yeah.
And then it's hard for us to gauge how many years of experience you have, with that, and how long ago you did it. So how relevant is that experience now? We got another question. What if you have combined multiple positions within one company that spans 5+ years? Should that also stay at 5 bullets? Okay. So it's a 2-part question. First of all, you shouldn't be combining your jobs. Okay. So if you have had, say you worked at, you're working at Nathan's company. And so you were a program manager when you first started there, and then maybe you got promoted to a program director. What I suggest in those instances is combining those positions and then noting that you were promoted, right? So that's how you combine those two. At that point, you're going to have 5 to 6 bullets because basically your job didn't change much. When you have positions that are drastically different from each other, meaning that you had different job duties, so you may have been in accounting in one role and then maybe doing program management in the next, you want to list those as separate positions with their own bullets. And again, how many bullets you have per job would depend on how relevant that information is to your new job target. So if you were promoted from accounting into program management and program management is your target, you're not going to list very many bullets about that accounting job because that information isn't relevant. So again, stay away from combining positions that are, so different that you don't feel like enough bullets, 5 or 6 would be enough bullets. Plus, again, that's going to be confusing to try to calculate how much experience you have. So you shouldn't be combining positions and then putting your job responsibilities or whatever under that. They should be separate entries.
Yeah, I
And that
agree with
helps
that.
for the recruiter reviewing it, but it also helps for the applicant tracking system as well.
Yeah, and I actually real quick, I've also seen the reverse. So someone was like an accountant one, accountant two, accountant three, and they have separate jobs, but under each job, it's all the same information. So
Yeah,
in
I've
that
seen
case, you
that.
would want to combine them, and then you don't want to be
Yes.
redundant. So yeah, that's a good point.
Right, right. So that's why I'd say, if you were promoted multiple times, you can either list promoted after 3 years to do blah, 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 or you can list it as a bullet that you were promoted and then tell why you were promoted, if you want to list it as an accomplishment bullet. So it could work either way.
Mhm.
All right, let's move to the next one. All right, let me put this in full screen so you can see it. So I can see it and then you do your full screen.
All right, business operations.
Mhm.
Oh, they're in North Carolina. Okay. I'm not too mad on the layout. So the summary is in bullets. So that's a change from having a thick summary at the very top where you got to
Mhm.
read through all the paragraphs. I like the bullets here. Um, First job is director of business operations. They give a little blurb about the company, and then they go right into bullets. So now here is where they're kind of mixing bullets. So this first four bullets feels like task oriented, like they're describing the role.
Mhm.
But I don't see in those first four bullets, I don't really see any accomplishment. I see kind of what the job is. They're reporting to the branch CEO, they're managing our business operations, acting as key advisor. But what do they accomplish there? I don't see that.
Mhm.
Um, and some redundancy. Reported to as you go through the resume, looking through the different jobs. So both Ash and I like to try to mix up the word choice. You don't want to be redundant or repetitive in the word choice. Um, Top skills. I'm a proponent of if you got a skill section, I like to bring that to the front of the resume. At the end of the resume, it could get lost, and those skills could be keywords that a recruiter or a hiring manager might be looking for. So bring those to the front of the resume, in my opinion. Then there's a technology summary. Okay, education, MBA, MPA, Bachelor of Arts. Mm. So I don't know, like business operations, the Masters of Public Administration. That feels like not aligned. I'm a proponent. If you got education, it should be relevant to the job target. A Master of Public Administration for business operations feels off to me a little bit. Then a BA in linguistics. Um, I don't know how you feel about that. Actually, listing. I mean, it's good to list education. If that's the only education you got, fine. But
Right.
a person has an MBA in international business, so I would think that's great. But then
Mhm.
I don't know about listing the additional education that maybe is not relevant. I don't know.
Yeah, so for this section, I would get rid of the MPA and then also the BA because they're not relevant to the job. And the fact that you got a master's, we know you have some bachelors, so it's not necessary for you to call that out, especially when they're not relevant. So they can get away with just putting the MBA on there. But one thing that I also saw is when the summary so the section headers look very similar to the bolded information about the jobs. So when you
That's true.
have that, it's hard for not only the human reader to decipher what section of the resume this actually is, but also for the applicant tracking system, because most systems that do parsing, meaning that they extract the information from your document and put it, and start your candidate profile, it is looking for consistency in formatting. So the summary, probably, I don't know if you want to maybe put that in all caps so it can be different and it stands out. So we know that we're starting another section, because on the right side of the page, you've got executive business partner, and then you've got relationship manager, and then you have, those positions, then the education and licensing, they all look the same.
Yeah.
right? So it's hard to, to read with that, but I'm, very aligned with what you said about the skills and everything needing to be, at the top of the resume, before your experience, so that it, stands out, because you're assuming that somebody's going to make it to the bottom of your second page,
That's right.
so you can see, more relevant information. But I did like the fact that they called out that their positions were remote. That is helpful to know, what type of environment you're used to working in. So that's why I didn't, I didn't fictionalize that part. But then also with, again, the repetition, and everything is there, but it's missing accomplishments. That's it. And so, like we said, everything can't be a bullet. So you see how every section is nothing but bullets. And so bullets are there just to draw out important information. Everything can't be important. Yeah, but otherwise, just generally speaking, this is not a bad document, but we want to see accomplishment bullets. And you can do that. Like, it's not really necessary for you to put the description of the company, there. You can make that just a teeny bit smaller and maybe highlight it in gray so that it's separate from your job scope and how you explain, what you were hired to do. And then your bullets are then your accomplishments. So that would be the only, the other feedback that I have. But, overall, just, not a trash resume, but definitely need some improvement there.
Yeah, and front loading. I like a mix of front loading and putting the accomplishments at the end as well. But yeah, definitely.
It depends on which one is, because that's the thing. The number doesn't always go first, right? So if the position is calling for you to have more strategy work, or maybe building some type of framework or implementing some type of system, if that is the piece that you need to draw attention to because that is most relevant, then you may list that accomplishment at the end. But most times your accomplishment is going to go at the beginning so that you can start with those results and then end with whatever. But it depends on what you're trying to draw attention to. But in this case, there aren't accomplishments here to front load or back load, because they're just not here. Yep. That was it. This was an easy one.
Yeah.
Pretty easy. All right, let's go to the next one. And then we'll check for some questions. All right. So this person is targeting HR leadership. And so in this particular role, we've got somebody who is strategic, so again, find another way to describe yourself besides strategic, because everybody says that they're results driven, they're strategic, they're dynamic, they are experienced, they're results oriented, results driven. All of those things are very overused, so they lose value. Unless the title of the position that you're targeting is strategic global HR leader, then you may want to call yourself that. But just generally speaking, find another way to describe the work that you do. All right. So it looks like they have HR initiatives to drive global performance. So that's showing some value there. And then we've got fostering a culture of innovation and high performance, skilled in leading. This is kind of reading like we got help from AI. Just because I've seen the same type of summary over and over and over again. And then I see there's a switch in the sentence structure. So where your last sentence, so most of these are saying the I is perceived, right? Or, so we're already knowing that it's implied, right? So I am a strategic global leader. I am skilled in, whatever. But then we have a collaborative communicator who can partner with the last sentence. It doesn't match the rest of these. So be careful with how you switch your sentence structure. It needs to make sense. It needs to be consistent. But I think this descriptor is very vanilla. There's nothing that stands out about this person. There's nothing that would make me want to run to, to hire them, because it's just the run of the mill stuff that you would expect from an HR leader. So find a way to incorporate your personal brand, your personal success stories in here to kind of vary it up. But everything is nicely put. I like the introduction of color here. Director human resource and talent acquisition function. So is explaining, what you've done. And then the highlights are actually accomplishments. They're not all front loaded. But here's an example of what we mean by the number can go last, right? So it's not front loaded by way of the number part of the success, but the highlight is that they've transformed the HR process. So that is something that would be great for the HR leadership. So in this case, they can either put that they increased employee engagement first, if this was an employee engagement role, if that was something that was heavily recruited for, for this type of role. But I think where the biggest impact comes in is where there was that transformational HR process. So you see the difference there. They could have front loaded it, but in this case, there's also success in being able to transform HR processes. So I'm glad this resume came up right to give us an example of a real resume. But the bullets are all accomplishments, right? The only feedback that I would have about the descriptions is that they're kind of long. So under the title where they've got their paragraph, that's a longer paragraph. And then there is repetition across positions because you have been in HR leadership for a while. So there are some things that you may be able to scale back on just a little bit, especially when you get to this HR business partner role on the second page, and those HR business partner roles. You can kind of trim the fat a little bit there because there is a little bit of repetition, throughout. Just because you've been in HR for so long. But like I said, overall, I think it's a really good resume.
Yeah, I would agree. It's laid out nicely. I don't see any weird formatting. I like the splash of color. I always like to see. I didn't really pick this out, but for core competencies, I always tell people if you list a competency, try to back it up somewhere in the resume. Don't just say that like cultural transformation. That's kind of vague, but is there any kind of specifics about cultural transformation in the resume? Is there anything specific about HR analytics? If you're going to list a proficiency, try to make sure you can back it up or list some sort of example of it in the accomplishment section somewhere. But no, I like it. The descriptions are a little long. The bullet points though are nice. They're nice and clean. They're written kind of tight. I like how there's some accomplishment there, some data there. It's like some results. So I don't see any huge red flags on this as I go through it.
Like I said, the only big feedback that I had about this particular resume is just that the summary statement is so generic that this could be I could slap this on my resume. and it could apply to me too. So make sure that whatever you're listing there, that's your selling point. Like, what are you doing to differentiate yourself from other people? So think about, things that you were able to accomplish that nobody before you was able to do it. Think about what your colleagues come to you for. What are you the go-to person for? And then that way you can kind of pick out those things that differentiate you from everybody else. So something has to be, your resume should be written to where everything, including your accomplishments, is so specific to you that nobody else, regardless if they have your same experience, and nobody else could use it because it's not their stuff. It doesn't apply to them. Yep. So let's look at some questions here. All right. So Robert said, what if I did the same job for two separate companies where one was a contractor for the second company and then became a full-time employee for that second company? So what you can do is put that as one listing and then describe what happened. Just say that you were converted from contractor to full-time employee after blah, blah, blah transition, right? However that. Then you just give a one little blurb, about that, and that should suffice. So you don't have to list that position twice just because it was a different company who kind of were intermingled with each other. I hope that made sense. I hope that was clear. I feel like I may have confused you a little bit. So what Robert is asking is that he worked for two separate companies, right? One of them was a contract opportunity. So one of those companies was a contractor for the other. Okay. So you're working for company A and company B. He had the same job at those, but company B is a contract company for company A. To me, that's the same job.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be
that was a little confusing reading through that. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
So one listing. Yeah. I would say one listing and then explain that you started as, for the contractor, in a contractor role and that you were converted to full-time employee. Right. Yeah. And you can put that you worked. So say for instance, it was Instagram, a Meta company, right? And so that's how you can list it. You can put the final resting place, but in seat, where are you on payroll, that company, and then put in parentheses, acquired by or contractor for, or, whatever, right? To explain that relationship in there. But yeah, you don't have to be very, you don't have to go into this long drawn out story. Just make it easy for the reader. How would the reader understand that? How could you explain that without confusing? Because you see, it took us a minute to kind of figure out what you're saying. So simplify.
Right. Yeah.
Write it for a sixth grader. And that's how you know that it's simple enough for the average human being to read and interpret it. Yep. All right. So we're moving right along.
Okay.
All righty.
All right. Finance target. Yeah. Well, so I like the layout. It's neat. Everything's spaced out nicely. Good white space. The profile, I mean, I'll use your term. It's a little vanilla. Dynamic leader, proven ability, skilled in. That kind of flow is pretty common. So try to find ways, if you're going to use a profile, to make it about you and make it really read and kind of pop. I don't know if I would use AI for that, because AI is going to give you just the vanilla version. So you got to work hard to make that stand out. Skills and abilities. Let's see. This is finance. Okay. I can see how those would be finance related. And then experience section. So, I mean, this is a recurring theme, a resume full of bullets. We like, you can't have all bullets, because now you're mixing accomplishments with tasks. So we like to separate the task and the responsibilities into like a little paragraph like you've seen before, so you can describe the job. So use a paragraph that's not a bullet to describe the role. Like that first bullet, partner with support organizations, managing 126 employees. That's like a job description. That's an overview or position description. So I wouldn't bullet that. I just put it into a paragraph. That second bullet, same kind of thing. It's talking about the job. So we got to separate accomplishments from your task. Any kind of task information that describes the role, just put it in paragraph form. And then, like Ashley has said, even from the beginning, bullets should be accomplishments only. And you attack those by the challenge, action, result format. You guys can Google that, or the problem, action, result format, where you describe the problem, the action you took, and you end with some sort of result. If you read through a bullet and there's not a result there, that's not an accomplishment. That's kind of the linchpin for an accomplishment, is the result. And if you can't identify a result to one of your bullet points, it's probably a task. It needs to be pulled out of that section. Date wise, we go back to 05. So that's getting long in the tooth. I always say the further you go back, the less information you can have. And I've even said, like, for jobs that are way back, I don't even list the date. I'll just say, earlier experience in engineer and blah, blah, blah. Right. And I'll leave it at that, because I don't know many people that's going to say, well, tell me about this job you did in 05. They're not going to dig into that. They want to know what you did the last 5 or 10. So that's kind of my feedback. I mean, I like the format, but all the bullets, we got to, pull out the accomplishments from the task.
Yep. And then you see it spilled over to a third page. But you see all this white space, right? So I think this is a 1-inch margin on this resume. So what you could do is reduce your margin size to 1/2-inch margins, all the way around, and that's going to give you some space. But then you can reduce the amount of space that's between the bullets,
right? Because
this is a lot of space here. Right. And so what it's doing is pushing your information over to a third page that's unnecessary. So this is a 2-page document, but that's just true. Spacing has forced it to go over to the second page. So I think if you stick to the space between your paragraph being 2-point, you can close up a lot of that white space and then change your margins to 1/2-inch margins on all 4 sides. Yep.
All
right. Moving right along. All right. So I don't know what job this person is targeting. They didn't list it. I can't really tell necessarily because they've done HR before. They've also done some mediation and conflict management, and then they've done real estate,
Mm.
and then they're a commercial associate. And so they've got a lot of accomplishments on the resume, which is good. Those are accomplishment bullets. But they don't have any descriptor of what type of position it is. So I can assume what a realtor does, but I don't know what a commercial associate is. So I don't know what you were hired to do. So I really don't know if this is success or not. And then I also don't know necessarily what you're targeting because you're a dynamic and solutions focused professional. And that's all I know. Right. But then also there's a LinkedIn profile URL. And so I left this here with the last numbers that are on here. I want you to customize that URL. Go to your profile, customize it, remove all of those numbers from the end of your LinkedIn profile URL. Imagine this URL on a business card, or you have to text it to somebody or tell somebody what it is, right? So I know that mine is in Ashley J. Watkins. Right. But I can't say that I'm at Ashley J. Watkins at -0479. I can't do that. Right. So make sure that you're customizing that URL. Good use of color, but inconsistency in headers because you've got summary, skills, and experience, which are in sentence case, but then you've got your other headers that are in all caps. So just be consistent with that. That's just from a visual standpoint. Is that going to stop you from getting hired? Probably not. Because if you meet my qualifications and that's the worst I can point out, you get an interview. Okay. Yeah. But just from if it just comes down to a little bit of 1-2 things to separate two candidates from each other, especially when it's looking at professionalism, overall presentation, because that is part of the assessment, in an interview. Little things like that can kind of stack up throughout the process, because if there's little details that you missed in the resume, you've got some typos in your email communication, you're a little bit late for, the phone interview or, whatever, those little things at various stages of the game can stack up. So just pay attention to those, those little things. But overall, just bullets everywhere, no description, and the achievements aren't front loaded. And then there's no clear target. I don't really know what you're targeting.
Yeah. And skill section, there's some team leadership, interviewing. Is that you interviewing people or you're a good interviewer? So interviewing is an interesting skill. But like you want to make sure the skills are specific. Team leadership, interviewing, time management.
And this is like a catch-all resume because you've got, legal writing in here, you've got interviewing, then you've got customer relations, you got project management, you've got mediations and advocacy. Like, is this a legal person or somebody trying to do real estate? I don't, I really don't know where this, where this person is targeting.
Yeah.
Because again, the summary is so generic that I can't tell. I should be able to read your summary and tell exactly what it is that you're able to do for me and what type of job you're targeting.
For most professionals, I would think at this point, Microsoft Office expertise or proficiency should be understood. I don't know. Is listed there? I mean, I guess for some jobs, they need to know you have it. But is that not like...
My rule of thumb is, I think anybody that has been working in a corporate environment for, at least 2-3 years, you've got Microsoft Office experience. But I can't tell you how many clients I end up with who don't have Microsoft Office just even on their home computer, right? Their personal device. But I also feel like if the job posting felt it was necessary enough to call it out, put it on your resume.
Yeah, I agree with that. Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. So if the posting calls it out, you may want to list it.
Yeah.
All right. Moving right along.
Am I up?
I don't even.
I think I am. Yeah. Recruiting. Okay. Ooh, recruiting. So you should have had this one. Let's see.
Oh, you want me to do it? And then we
let me go. Because this one is I'm 52. This is small font.
I can do it if you want me to.
No, I'm just saying, and that's one of my feedbacks.
Small
font.
It definitely is small,
So it's that's tight. I would
especially
definitely.
in comparison to the job titles.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, that's small. That's got to be less than 9. So we
And
gotta
it's
we
so
gotta make that bigger.
unnecessary for it to be that small because there's so
Yeah,
much white space here, and the
it's a lot.
margin could have been extended to a half inch. But
Yeah,
also, this 2-column thing is taking off space that you could be putting, information instead of, what I like to skills bar where you put all the skills under the sun that you have experience with
yeah,
in this little lump.
yeah. And there's probably a better format for the skills. You could probably, as opposed to vertical, horizontal, you might be able to
Yeah.
save space. They listed like I guess all of the applicant tracking systems that they have experience with, which is good. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess the more the better. So that's a good one. But
but that stuff could have fit on one line, two
yeah, I
lines.
think so. Yeah, just having
Yeah.
it vertical takes up a lot of space.
Hmm.
Um, Now I wonder in this one, so these are all recruiter, account manager. I guess these are all really recruiting roles,
Yep.
and there's a bunch of them.
Hmm.
In this case, would you be an advocate for like trying to? I mean, it's hard to kind of combine some of these roles, especially if they're with different companies. But it's a lot of roles. I mean, 3 years, 1 year. I mean, these are like less than 1 year. I mean, that
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. It's a
Yeah.
lot of
So
roles.
this person is probably going to have to answer a lot of questions about job hopping. That's just it.
It's a lot of short-term
Now,
roles. Yeah.
right. And I don't think that this individual was job hopping. They were
Well, it
just
says
a part
company
of
layoffs in some
unfortunate
of them.
layoffs because they had
Yeah,
1, 2, 3, yeah, basically 4 layoffs back to back.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, wow.
Then it didn't stop because then it came over to COVID
Yeah,
layoff. And then
yeah,
after that, so I think this was just unfortunate circumstances.
yeah,
But it would help if this person would list with every opportunity what happened because it's inconsistent. Yeah, you're calling out these ones that were company layoffs and then you called out a contract, but what about these other ones? So that's going to create a question for me. It's like you said what these other ones were for, but what about the one where you didn't last a year?
yeah,
Um, but it looks like too that was the same company.
okay.
But again, it's so big, it looks like a different opportunity. So that's why you have to be careful when you're lumping positions together under one listing that you make it clear that it's 2 different positions. Because I think they went from a talent acquisition consultant to maybe they did a partner services rep and they only lasted in that role a little bit. It was just April
Mhm.
2024 until October 2024. But again, I shouldn't have to try to figure it out. It should be so plainly put that it leaves no questions. But there's no success here. All of this stuff is just basically I mean, there is a few little bullets that
Yeah, I
that
see a
are
couple.
success. I mean, I see a few of them, but again, your bullet should be separate from how you're describing the work that you do.
What about like a hybrid format for this one? That way you can have like a key qualification section and maybe you could pull out because they've been a recruiter their whole career, seems like, or in
Mhm.
that talent acquisition space. They
Yeah.
pull out significant things across their career into a key qualification section that's kind of upfront, and that might, I don't know, that might sort of help with because this
Yeah.
is busy. It's a lot of
I
positions.
would think so. I think if this, so as a recruiter, when we go to interview, leadership and hiring teams, they are worried about our time to fill. They're worried about what we do for the customer experience. They are
Mm,
wondering how many recs, have we handled, at the most. They want to know what types of positions we did. They want to know where we're, what results our sourcing efforts have produced. So I think if you were to call out those metrics at the top of your resume, they
yeah, yeah,
probably wouldn't have to look at the rest of your resume because
yeah.
they see those titles. You've had very straightforward titles, across different industries. So I would have one bullet that talks about the industries that I've supported, one that talks about the types of positions or levels of positions that I've recruited for, and that kind of that rec load. Have one that talks about rec load, time to fill, and any other type of metrics that that you can talk about, just so they can have that snapshot of your recruiting ability.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way you can kind of streamline the content, but you really wouldn't even have to do that if you got rid of this type of format and just used a more straightforward format where you're reading straight across the page. And so I did highlight where there's a block over here where even the contact information is separate from the name.
Oh.
Your name, contact information, all of that should be on the same line, but they also, I think, yeah, it's separate because that's what's, kind of over there to the, to the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be the feedback that I would give, this person. Because if I'm looking at the, the resume, they could secure interviews with this resume for sure. I think so. But like visually to make sure that the success pops, because recruiting is very competitive right now. Recruiting, HR, customer success, all that is real, is real competitive at this point. So you want to do whatever you possibly can to make yourself, kind of head and shoulders over everybody else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But overall, you've got the right content with the wrong layout. That's the broader issue. And then if we're, digging down into it, we want to see those results be front loaded and separate from text.
Here's a crazy idea. And you tell me if I'm losing my mind on Thursday. But since all these roles are like recruiting, what if this person had just call it talent acquisition manager, senior recruiter, just call it a title, and you lead with the title, and then maybe you have a book in of dates, like a bigger booking of dates, and then you list the companies underneath, like all the companies underneath. Let's say we picked 4 companies, senior recruiter, and you list 4 companies, because most of this stuff, like, do you care?
Yeah, I worked as a senior recruiter for, for this type of, for these 5 companies, or or whatever, and then these are the these are the responsibility. It depends. It depends, because each of my recruiting roles has been different.
Yeah,
I've had the same title, but the work that I did and how I went about doing it was different. So it really depends on, how much repetition would be in those roles, whether or not I would advise them to do that. But they wouldn't have to do that if they used a different format for the resume that allowed them to use more space on the page versus having all this unnecessary white space because they've got this odd column.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right. Let me look. What we got going on in the comments over here? All right. So, is it okay to provide a general competency with specific skills in each area to get around being too generic? I don't know that I understand this question.
Yeah, I don't. Okay. General competency with specific skills in each area to get around being too generic. General competency with specific.
Well, the competencies that you list on your resume are going to be based on the job that you're applying to. So really, if your resume is targeted appropriately, you should not have to change but that skill section on your resume, because you are talking about the skills that are relevant to that type of job. So there would be no generic skills if you're focusing only on the skills from that target role. So you shouldn't have to have specific skills and then general competency skills. You wouldn't have those. It would be whatever skills were relevant to the particular job that you're writing that resume for, that you've tailored that resume for.
Yeah. Okay.
Did that answer your question, Charla? All right, I'm gonna come. Is this that's the one we just did. All right, cool beans. So now it's on to me.
Yep.
And I'll wait for Charla's response.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So one thing I did like about this, so this is a software engineer, is that they have put a link to their LinkedIn and also their GitHub. So their GitHub is going to tell me all about their, project software, all the stuff that I need to know about them from a technical standpoint. I like that. Now, this software engineer seems to be very new in their career. So in this case, the education is okay to be at the top of the resume, because especially since there is a very recent master's, then I think it's appropriate to have this education at the top, because you also don't have as much experience. You've got about 5 years of of experience, but I think after maybe this year, you should work on not relying on those projects, because the projects were to help you get that first IT job. We gotta put our adult, pants, shoes, whatever, on, so that we cannot have these resumes that look like they were written in our career services department. Okay. And so it's time to, to start taking those projects, internships, and stuff like that off there once you reach that 5-year mark. So I think we're coming up on that. This is, this is your 5 years of having that IT experience. But again, nice breakdown of the technical skills. I do like to see the technical skills for my software engineers broken out into space. I like to see that. I also like to see a lot of collaboration, a lot of, system updates, maybe debugging, whatever, part of software engineer you want to focus on. If it's system migrations, if it is application development, whatever that is, make sure that you're able to give strong examples of that. You do have some accomplishment bullets here, but they're woven into your task and what you were hired to do. So again, the same feedback that we're giving everybody: separate your bullets from your job scope. Okay, job scope, couple of lines, bullets, accomplishments. Bullets are accomplishments only. But that is the feedback that I have for this one. Overall, not a bad resume. It's typical of the software engineer resumes that I see for somebody who has not gone the step to, getting advice on their resumes. But again, content is always going to be king, queen, however you want to say that. So focus more on your content. Then you can work on making some updates to your design so it's not so outdated.
Yeah, and that second job, it looks like those are all accomplishments, but I'd like to see the little, what's missing on this one is the little description of like that, what that role does. That's nice to have. And I feel like this is a one pager. I mean, yeah, they don't have a lot of experience, but it feels like it feels crammed. So I don't like to go below like maybe 9 point on regular text. So this feels tiny. I don't know if it could be reformatted to like a page and a half. I mean, I don't have any problem with the page and a half resume. I don't like to force things into one.
Yeah. And I put a note there about dates, because there are dates in the application. If you have the degree, we don't care how long you were in school. Just put your end date if you're going to put it there. But then also be cautious of adding your dates to your education if it's not recent, because it can leave you open and exposed to ageism. So while we're giving this advice, we are giving advice to these specific individuals in their specific case on their resumes. Some of our advice is never one size fits all, because everybody's situation is different. So while we're telling this person that it is okay for them to have their dates there, if you graduated like I did over 20 years ago, girl, don't put those dates on their resume, because while I may not look like a dinosaur, some 20-year-old me who was, had my, foot newly into the recruiting space, thought that people who were 40 were dinosaurs to me. That's just what my mindset was at that 20-year-old. But then it also in IT, there's this thing of, older individuals not being able to keep up with technology and stuff like that. So you've got to be careful about where you put those dates or how you list your dates, because you want people to know that you're with it and that you're able to, to learn, and that, you're just as capable as these young whippersnappers that just got out of school. You can still get it together. So don't do things to draw attention to your age unnecessarily. So that's why I just want to make mention of the dates here. It's fine. I don't have any issue with it. I just don't care for listening the begin date, because I only care about your end date when you got that degree.
That's a good point.
I don't even care about the date. I just care about the completion. I just want to know that you got the degree. That's it. Yep.
That's pretty short and sweet on that one. Yeah.
Short and sweet. Yeah. Like I said, overall, not a bad resume. We've got some pretty decent resumes this time around. Not bad, but definitely in some areas for improvement. I would also like to see a resume title for this person, because it just jumped straight from their contact information to education. If you're going for software engineer roles or application development, whatever, put the title on the resume. What I was seeing too when I was receiving these resumes, y'all, why y'all sending me resumes called Resume 2025? Your resume should be your name, and the type of
Yeah.
position you're targeting. So, I would be Ashley Thomas, senior recruiter, or, talent acquisition manager, or, whatever the case it would be. Or just Ashley Thomas resume. But I'd like for you to assign a job title to it, because I may not, as a recruiter, I've talked to you, you email me your resume or whatever. I may not remember your name, but I remember the position you were applying for.
Mm.
Right. So I want you to put that, get in the rhythm of having the resume be your name and then the title, but you're never going to save your resume as just resume and then the year.
Yeah,
I have
right
tons of resumes that I get right now that are saved as that exact same thing. You want the similar branding across the board. Your name, your social media, everything. Your resume name, all that stuff should be consistent.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Just be findable. You got to be findable. That's going to help you be findable.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here's another one.
RN case management. Okay. So that first paragraph is in bold. There's a lot of capitalization going on there. I don't know. That probably needs to be rewritten, but self-motivated and solution-focused registered nurse. That's a lot of capitalization going on. So that needs to be rewritten. Hospital acute care registered nurse case manager, 1.5 years. All right, everything's in bullets. People like bullets.
They love bullets. They do. They're
now,
ready for ammunition.
For the folks that have not been joining us before, do not take your job description and just plop it into your resume and bullet everything. Don't do that, because we recruiters, resume writers, we can tell a mile away if that's a job description. So don't do that. You can use components of that to describe the role, but then you need accomplishments. So as I read that first section, that feels like a job description all day, every single bullet. It just feels like if you read through that tells you what you were assigned to do. That's your job description, but I don't know how well you were in this. I don't see accomplishments. What did you do well? How did you make an impact? It just feels like a job description. The next section, responsible for perform. See, a key giveaway is when you see something that says performs responsibilities in 5 areas. That's a job description. Responsible for, collaborates with. That's all in like third person.
Yeah, anytime it ends with S,
yeah,
with what when the verb ends in S, we know that it comes straight from a job description. But I didn't like how this resume lumped positions together. So they combined 2 different positions under one type. So they were a hospital acute care registered nurse case manager at company A and at company B. Right.
Okay.
So that's what I have covered up is company A and company B. And so that's why there's dates out, to the side of that. And then they're saying 1.5 years. That's unnecessary information. So you've wasted a line telling me how many years when I can just use simple math. I don't really need you. You can make my job easier in other ways.
Is the same thing for the second job? 2 different places?
Yeah.
Okay. And they have the same.
I don't know. I would have to talk to this individual to see what was the reasoning behind doing it, because I've never seen this done, where you're listing the companies like that and the dates under one position title listing.
I bet you what they had before is they had the same section twice. It's like, that's redundant. Let me just do it once. Because if it's the exact same position, they may have tried to do it and they just copied and pasted twice and realized that's really long and redundant. So they said, let me just combine them. Possibly, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what happened here, but I don't like it, because it's really confusing to me, and especially when I'm trying to read it and and try to interpret and figure out what happened, because I'm not really sure why it was done this way. And so if this person isn't getting interviews, this would be why.
Yeah, and it's lacking accomplishments, and it's all job description stuff. It's like.
But okay, so here's the thing. When it comes to, to nurses, the resumes are scrutinized far less than it would for somebody like in marketing or, even in HR per se,
Hmm.
because there's a nursing shortage, so they're given a lot of leeway when it comes to this. But at this level, when you're talking about case management, okay, then that's a smaller pool of individuals, and they could easily get somebody to do, parts of this role that don't have a background as an RN, right? So now you're getting into a smaller pool of people who probably have already either done RN case management before, or maybe they laid their information out, more plainly. Well, then that person is going to get the interview, whether you've got more experience than them or not.
Yeah.
Because your information is, just too easy, too hard to figure out. And so you want to make yourself the obvious choice. It should be, no, your document should not be creating more issues or creating more questions than it answers.
Yeah. This is a classic job description resume. I mean,
yeah.
And I know people say, look, I just did my job. This is what I didn't have any accomplishments, even as a nurse. Well, you did. Did you train people? Did you write processes and procedures?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, if you did not show up for work for a month, would they miss you? What would go wrong? And hopefully you would say something, because you said, well, nothing would go wrong with it. You don't need to have that job.
They're right. Then something you're right. You need to be on this job hunt, finding something else.
Yeah. So this one needs a lot of work. It's just job description information, and you got to challenge yourself and say, okay, how do I make a difference? Think about, nurses on this. Well, I guess you could save money if you were working with, one of those pharmaceutical reps. Maybe you had an opportunity to work on something and bring something new to the hospital. Mm-hmm. You got to challenge yourself. You got to stand
even
out.
If they found a way to make things safer, if they found a way to reduce people's return. I forgot what they call that. It's on the tip of my tongue. But when people are discharged, so they don't have to come back, right? Because something went wrong. They got an infection or did whatever. If you implemented some sort of patient education for somebody doing case management, that means you're following up with the patients, making sure that they receive the quality services that they need in order to, improve their overall, health outcomes, right? Yeah. So what did you do to contribute to that? Their success and all of that. Did you get a additional caseload? Talk about the different areas that you've supported. Was it obstetrics? Was it oncology? Was it, emergency room? Whatever it is, talk about the success metrics that you've had, in those areas. Let's jump to a question. You want to take Terrence's question?
Yeah. So how far back? So my rule of thumb is, I first look 10 to 15. If 20 is enticing, if you look, 20 years ago, I was a rock star and the work I did then was highly relevant to what I'm doing now, I might include that. But very rarely do I go back more than 20 years, unless this person's trying to be a CEO and they need to show 30 years of some sort of experience. But that's very rare. Mm-hmm. C-suite execs, you don't get there, in 5 years. You got to show some longevity. But if, middle manager, director below, 10 to 15 good years, 20 if I'm stretching it. And 20 takes us back to 2005. That's a long time ago.
Right. So, and that's only if the job that they had, kind of spanned across those decades like that. That's the only way that I, usually, include that. But yeah, my cutoff is 10 to 15.
Yeah. And a caveat, hopefully that answers his question. Caveat to that is, there was a time where if you stayed at a company for 15 years, that was really appreciated. Now people are like, well, why were you there so long? Why didn't you leave? So
yeah, they think you're stuck in your ways and and everything.
Boomers and old Gen Xers, kind of value staying somewhere for a long time. Millennials, Gen Z, they trying to be out in 3 to 5. So if these recruiters, if they get young and younger to come in, they see you being somewhere 20 years, and you're like, yeah, I was there for 20 years. It's like, well, why? Why didn't you leave? So just kind of keep that in mind.
And then the thing to that though, you could have been at a company like Nicole said, 25 plus years, but I don't want you sitting at that same desk doing that same job for those 25 years. That's where the big issue comes in. You at least want to show some diversity in the types of roles that you had. You want to show some type of growth, so people think you're not just sitting on this, on this job meal doing. I mean, so it really depends on that situation. But when I've had clients who have had those same roles for that, that 20 years or whatever, we'll break it off into 10 years and then, put that they may have, started at the time. Because really, if the roles that they're going for is only asking for 7 years of experience, it doesn't matter that you've been at your job for 20 years.
That's right.
You're probably not going to get paid for those extra, too many of those extra years. So we may chop it off at that 15-year mark and then put the other part as an early career.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for this resume, I don't know how they do it in healthcare if they have regular performance reviews. Hopefully they do. That's a great place to kind of data mine for accomplishments. Hopefully you're sitting down with your management team and going over objectives and goals. That's a great way to kind of pull out some accomplishments. Now, for people who are very proactive with their career, you should be sort of charting these things down monthly. Now, I know that's kind of a big ask. Most people just do their job, but if you really think about it, take time to, when you have those wins and successes, chart them down somewhere, because you'll forget. If you've been somewhere 10 years and you got all these accomplishments, you're going to forget as time goes on. So try to capture these things so when it's time to do the resume, you have them handy.
Okay. Let me see something real quick. So, yeah, so Nicole, because I want to address Nicole. Nicole says she's a mildew covered dinosaur. Look, Nicole, I get it. I get it. But even if your job title did not change, your level of responsibility or level of support, it had to have changed. You're a P&P girl. You had to have done something to keep you on board there. There had to be some level of growth that's shown in some type of way. That's all I mean. So not, saying, well, and you've got accomplishments that are from 10 years ago or whatever. We need some stuff that's within the last, at least 5 years. So yes, you can be, what is considered a dinosaur, because I'm up there with you, girl. I'm up there with you. But you got to show that you've had some level of growth, whether it's, accumulating some different responsibilities or, something has to be able to, to show that growth. So Robert is asking, I heard different viewpoints. Should you include your address? No.
Street address, no.
Yeah. Never include your street address. Now you can, add your location, but the thing to that, if you live in some little podunk city, like for instance, me, I live in a little podunk city where nobody knows, just overall, just throughout the US, they know my state or they know maybe the major cities, but not necessarily my little rural area. Right. Or outskirts or whatever. So I may put Birmingham area. Right. Mm-hmm. So you can do that. So sometimes when you stay in smaller little cities, sometimes I'll put Los Angeles area, or Bay Area, or something like that to give you a general idea of where this person is located. But you don't want to put your street address on there. You want to give only the bare minimum information for them to make a decision about your candidacy. At that point, if it's not an official application, your resume is going to, God knows who. Right. And all these little, random systems. And so you don't want, they got your phone number, your email address and all this stuff. And then their system gets compromised and now they know where to find you. Mm-hmm. So you don't need to put all of that personal information out there on the resume. Whereas the application itself is a little bit more protected, even though there's a chance that we take anytime we divulge information about ourselves, to people. But definitely you don't want to put your full address on any resume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't seen this in our 3 sessions, but every now and then I'll see a resume, either it says references available, but you don't need that, or I've seen people actually put references on their resume. Don't do that. Because now you got your reference information on your resume, and it's in Indeed, it's on LinkedIn, it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. So references are always separate page, and you only give that out when asked for it, never as a part of your resume.
All right. Let's move right along. Here. So here's another resume here. All right. So this person is an engagement manager. Not really sure what that is. I'm assuming that's in an umbrella of maybe HR-ish. I don't know. But anywho, so this person did put their physical address on the resume. And so that's why I captured it just a little bit here so that you can see what I mean. So that shouldn't be there. It should only be your city, state at at the minimum. You can put your zip, but I wouldn't even do that, because if you live in a city that's very segregated or is very, zoned by how much, income you have, by race, or, or whatever, like the city that I'm from, then you don't want to put your zip code there, because then people can make assumptions about your race and, about your, economic capacity, that kind of stuff. So you don't want to list more information than necessary. Here again, there's lumping of the positions together, but there's a notation of the promotion. I would like to see these split, because an office support, well, they could be combined. So the office support specialist of benefits and wellness, a professional administrative analyst, benefits and wellness, the same thing. I'm not really sure how, where the promotion comes in with that. Maybe it's the analytics part of it. But you can combine these positions and then notate the promotion elsewhere. Right. So you could have left office support specialist, benefits and wellness off, because you're already covering the administrative piece of it. And then you're notating that it was a promotion. So I would put those full dates there from October 2021 up until present, and let there be one listing so that it's less confusing. All right. So that's one thing. Another thing. So bullets everywhere. So again, description, then accomplishment bullets. We said that a million times. I'm not going to give a specific example of that again. We've done it a couple times throughout this. Let's see. Aside from just not knowing what an engagement manager is, I'm not really sure, because I've seen engagement be in more in customer service, but then I've also seen it in account management, and I've seen it in HR too. I'm going to assume that this is HR just from the benefits and wellness stuff. But I do see some achievements, but they're kind of hidden in between the tasks stuff, and as far as the bullets are concerned. And then those technical skills, again, they're on the last page, and then there's no branding. So I don't really know. Again, the resume has no title, and then it also has no summary statement. It has no unique value proposition to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the professional credentials is jacking me up, because the dates are all over the place. I like reverse chronological. It's just like it's jumping around. So just list your credentials, most recent to earliest. Make sure they're all relevant. Anything that's not relevant, you can remove. The same thing with the bullets. There's a mix of accomplishments with tasks and duties. We want to strip that out, the duties and the tasks, in a little paragraph form, followed by responsibility accomplishments in a challenge, action, result form. Make sure they're specific and have results attached. Skills should be moved to the front. Basically reiterate what you said, Ashley. I don't see anything else that's jumping out other than those dates on the right. I am curious. I'd love to read that thesis, The Millennials, the Future Global Workforce. I'd love to read that. That's kind of interesting.
All right. And I think we got just this, our last one.
Oh, okay.
Yep. All right, take it on home for us, Nathan.
All right, so I see they got the address. So yes and no street address necessary. That's just with all the privacy things going on. Let's see here. So project management, education, BS and kinesiology, things like that. Master of Science and healthcare management. So I would reverse those, just reverse chronological on the education, most recent to the earliest. So we got fitness specialist, data coordinator, project assistant, manager, risk adjustment, project manager. Okay. We go back to 2016. All right. And then relevant experience. Okay. So we got some font issues going on. That first paragraph.
We do. And I honestly think that the relevant experience could have just started out the beginning of the resume, because it gives more it gives more branding and insight into what's important to the person and where they've had the most success. So I think if they combine that in some way, that would be better than having both, because it's the same type of information. So it just becomes overkill.
Now, this is interesting. This is project management, and they have a relevant experience as customer care. It says committed to promoting quality customer care and ensuring an optimal patient experience. Am I missing something? Well, I
I
guess they
don't know.
were a
Maybe it's
fitness
a project
specialist at one
management
point.
position for healthcare. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it could be. They were a fitness specialist at one point. So, and maybe this
Yeah.
is in healthcare. Okay. All right. Um, Streamlining workflows, healthcare operations. Okay. Project management. All right. Areas of expertise.
He has a bunch of soft skills. Bunch of soft
Yeah.
skills there.
Analytical leadership.
Project manager. I'm
Yeah.
looking for KPI tracking. I'm looking for vendor relationships. I'm looking for contract negotiation. I'm looking for, the type of projects that you man. I mean, I'm looking for more high level skills than
Yeah.
problem solving and verbal and written.
Yeah. Analytical leadership. Yeah. Those are just, yeah.
Yeah, calling out the English and Spanish, love it because bilingual is definitely a plus, especially depending on the community that you serve. But yeah, other than like I said, it's just bullets, bullets, bullets. Everywhere bullets should be, just the accomplishments, but I don't see very many accomplishments here.
Yeah.
If you're a project manager, the type of accomplishments I'm looking for is the fact that you saved money, the fact that you maybe saved time, that you, brought a project through from, conception through completion, that you kept it under budget, that you managed risks, that you built vendor relationships, you negotiated those contracts, you kept things flowing in order to produce an outcome for your organization. That is the type of stuff that I want to see, not necessarily that you assessed and interpreted customer needs, identifying solutions to non-standard requests and problems. That's given job description.
Yeah. What was the
I don't know
result?
the types of projects that you covered, the types of companies that you worked with. I want to see cross-functional collaboration. I want to see that stuff. So when you say you're fostering a team environment, where are you telling me that you work with those teams and to do what?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the missing results. I mean, like there's a lot of actions. Like that second job, developed and revised risk adjustment medical record review process and tools.
Yep.
Okay.
But what's the
Why is
result?
that important?
Why is it important? Like, so what? Yeah. So if you go through every bullet and say, so what, if you can't give the so what, then you need to just get rid of it.
Yeah. You got to have result. I mean, results are what separate you from the competition. Just listen actions. Okay, that's fine. I see what you did, but how impactful was that? Why was that important? So what? So you gotta really close the loop with the result piece. And it's not always, like we always say, it's not always a number, but if it improves something or decreased something, if you know it did that, say that. You don't have to know how much it did it by, but if you know it improved or decreased or has some sort of impact, list that, include that.
Let's see. So let me address this real quick. So you on our live, right? And so we're professional resume writers and career coaches and, job search coaches, and we're certified and legit, right? So the audacity to come on our live and then try to get our participants to message you for a resume, like that's not going to be tolerated at all. So if anybody is watching the replay or anybody want to jump in, not on my watch. You're not going to do that. So Robert, if you're actually needing some resume help, anybody else that is on the call who needs resume help, these are the individuals that you will contact for said help, because we'll make sure that we're not, for one, scamming and spamming, on other people's lives. We're actually here to help you and support you and give you valuable information that will help you land more interviews and also higher paying salaries. So be careful when, people prey on you, especially when they're stepping out, they're overstepping and jumping into people's lives and then telling you to message them and doing all that, just being real thirsty, about, getting business and things like that. That's usually the biggest way for you to know that somebody is scamming and spamming.
I'm appalled, Ashley. I'm shocked. I can't see the chat, so I'm so shocked that I don't know this person, but wow, that's some boldness right there. I mean,
just be careful. So I would advise you to
yeah.
maybe block individuals like that, because on LinkedIn is very, very rampant these days, where people are, they're coming into your comment section and they're saying, message me, do this, all this kind of stuff. A legit recruiter or a legit resume writer is not going to use thirsty tactics to get you to work with them. They're just not gonna do that. Okay. So anytime you see that, just know that you need to probably just block that person and not work with them, because if they're so good, they're gonna be doing things like we're doing right now on this live.
Wow.
They're not gonna be chasing people down on other people's lives, or hounding you about messaging them. They're just not gonna do that. Okay, so just be careful, because there are a lot of scams. I would suggest that if you're, concerned about job scams, there is Mark Anthony Dyson that you would want to connect with on LinkedIn. He has a job scam report, and so he talks about a lot of ways that you can recognize scammers. Jay Jones, if you're not already following him, he gives a lot of tips and everything. I actually address scammers and spam and stuff like that on my LinkedIn profile as well. Y'all be careful out here, because people are very predatory, and, legit resume writers and stuff, people who have, legit businesses who are helping people, they don't use those types of tactics to, get you to, to try to support them, or that they're really not thirsty to help you.
And they're not going to be on the live
about helping you, but we're not thirsty over here.
Yeah, well, they're not going to be on the live for an hour and a half giving out free advice on a Thursday.
Exactly. Exactly. They're going to be on their own platform, promoting promoting their individual services and talking about the success that they've had helping people. Again, you can find me on LinkedIn as Ashley Watkins Thomas. If you're here from LinkedIn, you can follow me on Facebook, also on, on YouTube as well. We will post the replay. So if you want to, come back and, watch this again, so you can, make sure that you got all the tips and you're able to take all of your notes, that will be great. And we will announce when we will do the next one, and when we'll start accepting more resumes. We kind of stockpile right now, but we will announce when we are accepting more resumes. But if you want to reach out to Nathan, or me for resume help, for interview coaching, for all things job search, reach out to some legit professionals who, have credentials and experience to be able to help you and get you to where you want to be. We are so glad that you spent this evening with us, and we want to hear about the success that you've had after you've implemented some of these changes into your own documents.
Yeah, that matters to us. We're giving this advice, but we definitely want to hear back from you. You try some of the things we're saying. We've been in the game a long time, so we know what we're talking about. But give us the feedback. You try some things, you see some success, some uptick in calls or callbacks or interviews. Please let us know that. We'd love to hear it.
Yep. All right. Well, we will see you guys later.
See ya.
Thank you.